Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nagmah Reilly. I'm a member of the Board of Immigrant Council of Ireland, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our panel today, Making Labour Integration Work. The session is 2 hours. We are starting with a keynote speaker by Dr. Orla Quinn, who is the Secretary General of the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation. This will be followed by a panel discussion with contributions from Michael Polowski from the Economic Social Research Institute, Mavis Ramazani from the Irish Refugee Council, Sandra Roos, who's an expert on migrant women labour integration, and Dr. Ebon Joseph, who's a labour integration and anti-racism expert. What I would ask is that you are engaged with us throughout these 2 hours. Please do send us your comments, your questions through the chat box feature, and we will read them out during the Q&A and ask the panel to address them. So it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Orla Quinn. She's the Secretary General of the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment in Ireland, and advises the government and leads the department and its offices and agencies in promoting the creation of high quality and sustainable full employment by championing enterprise, supporting and incentivizing a competitive and innovative research and enterprise base, negotiating international trade agreements, and promoting fair and competitive employment and markets. A career civil servant, she has held leadership positions across several public bodies, spearheading reform of Ireland's public and civil service at the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, and as head of corporate and head of national pension in the Department of Employment Affairs and Social Protection. She has also led on EU and international affairs and served as an expert advisor on employment and social policy at the European Commission. She is a former visiting research fellow of Trinity College Dublin and holds a master's in public management and a doctorate in governance from Queen's University Belfast. She is also author of 2 books on public policy topics. So Dr. Quinn, we are really looking forward to hearing your address. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nagmah. And I'm delighted to be joining you today. And I'd particularly like to thank the Immigrant Council and indeed your CEO, Brian Killoran, for inviting me to speak to you and to give the perspective on the importance of the integration of migrant workers into our economy and our society. So your title, Making Labour Integration Work, is an imperative for Ireland, given the benefits accruing for the individuals concerned, the economy, and indeed our society as a whole. The topic covers a very wide range of elements across various government departments. So this morning, I hope to touch on some of those aspects, areas that cover an integrated labour force, including our economic migration policy, why attracting migrant workers is an economic imperative, our future skills needs, the migrant integration strategy, employment rights protections here, some of the positive integration initiatives, and finally, I can't leave without some of the impacts of COVID-19. So to start, look, we know what integration and how we define it in current Irish policy. It's the ability to participate to the extent that a person needs and wishes in all of the major components of society without having to relinquish his or her own cultural identity. And successful integration is the responsibility of all of us and Irish society as a whole. The Irish State's general policy is to promote sourcing of labour and skills needs from within the workforce of Ireland, the European Union, and other European Economic Area states, or the EEA as we refer to it in the first instance. The last quarterly labour force survey published in Q3 2020 showed that of the 2.3 million people employed here, 2.6% were from the UK, 9.4% were from the European Union, and 4.6% were non-EEA nationals, demonstrating the majority of migrant workers in Ireland come from the EEA and UK, working and living here by virtue of the freedom of movement under the treaties and the Common Travel Area. Workers from non-EEA countries, generally with employment permits, come to the state to fill specific skills which cannot be sourced from our domestic and EEA labour markets. Our economic migration policy is part of the response to addressing skills deficits which exist and are likely to continue into the medium term, but not intended to act as a substitute for meeting the challenge of upskilling the state's resident workforce. So we place a big emphasis on lifelong learning and on maximising potential to fill skills deficits. Economic migration policy is essentially the framework within which our employment permit system operates. And that system is located within my own department. It's designed to supplement our skills and labour supply over the short to medium term by allowing enterprises recruit nationals from outside of the EEA where we cannot source those skills. By design, the employment permit system tends to be pro-cyclical, expanding and contracting in tandem with fluctuations in the economy. The system focuses on key sectors and skills shortages, especially in economically strategic enterprises with potential for jobs growth. We adhere to the principle of EU community preference, which is avoid disrupting the labour market or reducing the employment opportunities for the resident population. It seeks to ensure that employment permit holders make a positive net contribution to the economy and minimise, in particular, the potential for abusing the employment rights of migrants. It is clear and consistent and therefore attractive to migrants and employers. Unlike other jurisdictions, in Ireland we do make a clear division between economic migration and general economic policies, and thus an applicant for an employment permit undergoes a separate application process with immigration service delivery for immigration permissions and visas to work in the state. The circumstances where a non-EEA national is not required to have an employment permit occurs where the Minister for Justice grants permission, for example, to non-EEA spouse or partners of EU citizens and indeed programme refugees. When we look at other sources then of non-EEA labour, the principal means by which people can work in the state and access our labour market is based on their needs rather than their economic utility, and that tends to be the international protection applicants and international students. Since June 2018, when Ireland opted into the EU Reception Conditions Directive, international protection applicants have been able to work after 9 months from the date when their application was lodged, if a first instance decision has not been taken. And this permission allows international protection applicants access to employment and self-employment. And since its introduction in June, just over 6,000 permissions have been issued, including just over 4,500 for those in direct provision. More recently, following the review of labour market access carried out by the Department of Justice in parallel with the work of the Catherine Day Advisory Group, which was on the provision of supports, including accommodation to persons in the international protection process, government approved a reduction in the waiting period from 9 months to 6 months. In addition, international students attending a course on a list of eligible programmes and who are on Stamp 2 immigration permission can take up casual employment of up to 20 hours part-time per week or up to 40 hours during college vacation periods. Their entitlement to take up employment ceases when their permission to remain expires. If we look at then just some of the statistics on employment permits, in recent years it has brought with it an increase in the number of highly skilled foreign nationals being employed in Ireland as companies expand and seek to meet their personnel needs in an increasingly competitive and global labour market. The number of employment permits issued has increased year on year since 2014. Indeed, even despite the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on the labour market, in 2020 we recorded a 1% increase over 2019, which itself was a 13% increase. So large increases in recent years, and we currently have 26,000 on valid employment permits in Ireland. And some of that economic imperative for attracting migrant workers is based on our economic policy, which is focused on foreign direct investment and attracting investment into Ireland. We have become one of the most open economies in the world and measured as such. So while many of the benefits associated with that inward investment are well known, one of the key strengths we do have is that we have strengthened and internationalised Ireland's workforce. We have proportionally one of the highest international workforces now in the EU. As a committed member of the EU, we do provide companies with guaranteed access to the European market. We're now the only English-speaking country in the Eurozone, which does provide an ideal base for a European base for companies. And we have the brightest talent from across the EU located here. And we've seen now, I notice even in my own career, we have a multinational and a multilingual jobs force with really strong skills and really positive attitudes. So as a global hub, we want to continue to attract that international talent, companies and investors. And we see talent and skills in this country as a key success factor for us to win foreign direct investment. I think we've also benefited, and I think it's important that we recognise that we have benefited from those FDI companies. A recent OECD study showed that 1 out of every 4 employees in overseas firms either moved to a domestic firm or became self-employed. And that gives us really valuable knowledge and skills transfers. Multinationals located here also supply domestic firms with exposure to knowledge, technology, global value chains, all of which helps us to improve our own levels of productivity and our own innovation. In many sectors, attracting investment has become to a second degree a competition based on talent provision. And so we need to make sure that we have the requisite skills and that we're not restricted, as we have been in the past, to language or indeed to technical capabilities. So we want to continue to attract that talent to enhance our talent base. In addition to that, we also want to ensure that we are active in positioning ourselves as an attractive location for people to come here and work across a wide range of disciplines. If I talk a little bit then just about our future skills needs, because again, I think it's really important that people have a view of where the labour market is moving and where we would see potential opportunities. So obviously our future skills needs will be based on areas like technological adoption, driving digital transformation, the need to enhance our SME productivity, decarbonisation, shift to a low carbon economy, and to trade diversification, because again, we do need to mitigate the impact of Brexit on our economy. So we see these trends as a need of reskilling, upskilling workers in areas in digital skills. There will be impacts, there will be displacement by automation, and these impact more heavily on those who are in low-skilled occupations. So the impact of the pandemic itself has also caused, as we have seen, a greater shift towards that remote working, engagement with e-commerce, and all of it is serving to accelerate digital transformation. So high-level skills are really important. Obviously, we have a huge priority to reduce carbon emissions and meet our targets around renewable energy generation over the coming decades. So skills related to energy efficient retrofit, onshore, offshore, and solar generation will be in increased demands. Our housing, our infrastructure, and our regional development needs are key. So we will expect to see consistent demand for skills in construction, engineering, architecture, and related professions. And obviously then, and we have seen it so clearly here in the pandemic, skills associated with the logistics, supply chain management, customs clearance, all of those in terms of that complex trading environment that we now have will help us to support our trade diversification objectives. And then overarching that, obviously, business development skills, sales, marketing, customer service, foreign language current competency and cultural awareness are also hugely important. And these will all come into what we would see as an increasingly trade diversification agenda for Ireland. So it is important that we emphasise skilling of our workers, those who will be impacted in particular by digital and green transitions, as well as new skills required. I think we saw some of that in the July jobs stimulus 2020, when the government put in place funding for an additional 35,000 additional training places across further and higher education. So for this reason, and in tandem with a desire to have an appropriate skill set, it's also very important that we attract foreign nationals into our country to take up these key positions. We've put in place, for example, a new website, techlifeireland.com, to attract talented and experienced tech experts to Ireland. And again, it gives us an opportunity to showcase what we have to offer. If I turn then to reflect on the migrant integration strategy, which, as you know, ran from 2017 to 2020, and I understand is now being extended to 2021. This provides the framework for government's approach to the issue of migrant integration for that period. It covers EEA and non-EEA, economic migrants, refugees, and those with legal status to remain here in Ireland. The strategy affects both government departments, public bodies. We have 16 offices and agencies as part of my department, business sector, community, voluntary, faith-based, cultural and sporting organisations, as well as very explicitly focused on families and individuals. It's important also, and I think the actions in it to address racism and xenophobia that are there on the basis of a whole of government approach. From what I hear, good rate of progress is being reported on the 79 actions in the strategy. And as I mentioned, it is being extended to the end of this year. A couple of things across government, I think, to promote greater introduction, which do help. And I think certainly for us, and as a leader of the civil service, you know, we don't reflect the society we serve. And it's very important that we do and should. One of the areas is around increasing employment opportunities for migrants in the public service, and I strongly recommend people to keep an eye and look for opportunities to work in the public service. The Public Appointment Service, which runs appointments for us, has revised the eligibility criteria for general service recruitment. It used to stipulate that you must be an EEA citizen, but this has now been broadened to encompass those with international protection, refugee status, and indeed the spouses and children of non-EEA spouses who have a stamp 4 visa. These changes came into play in 2020 competitions and will be included in all general service, civil service recruitment in the future. So again, definitely urge you all, please keep an eye on it. It's a positive development and opportunities will continue to be developed to remove the barriers to ensure that we have diverse talent across an equality, diversity and inclusion spectrum in the public service. The expansion of eligibility criteria to include the refugees and non-EEA spouses is a key achievement, and I certainly look forward to an increased diversity workforce in the public service. The outreach that the Public Appointment Service have had with migrant organisations also to raise awareness, I understand has increased by 50%. So again, more of that is required. The other area I think is important to touch on is the Department of Social Protection, because again, under the Public Employment Service, they provide job search and activation supports for people to have a close relationship with SOLAS and the Education and Training Boards, the ETBs, and indeed other stakeholders to include and identify appropriate reskilling and upskilling opportunities for those seeking employment. Their Youth Employment Support Service targets young job seekers that face significant barriers, and youth from ethnic minorities are specifically named as a designated target group. Participants receive mentoring and coaching supports, learn basic work and social skills in a supportive environment, and they've had in the region of 1,000 participants on those programs since October 2018 when it began. So again, more of that I think is really important and worthwhile. More recently, the establishment of the new Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science is viewed by government as the first step in setting a new agenda for further and higher education, one that is a vital national resource socially and economically. I know there is a determination within that department that they will be the driver of a vibrant sector to produce and to support individuals with skills to progress in the way that they want to and in a way that meets the needs of our evolving economy and contributes to an inclusive society. Unequal access to education can result in migrants being at risk of social exclusion. I don't need to tell your audience this, Nagmah, but in the longer term, it has a negative effect on quality of life. So again, fostering inclusion is one of the 3 core pillars around which the further education and strategy is being built. It aims to ensure that systemic and structural barriers within further education to learner participation is addressed and success is proactively addressed. So every learner, particularly from those from marginalised communities such as migrants, can access available learning opportunities and be enabled to fulfil their potential. The government is committed to a long-term approach to direct provision, as you know. This will take time to implement, but in the meantime, it will continue to make improvements for residents seeking access to further and higher education. As a first step, I think changes were announced to the student support scheme for people living in direct provision. And following a review, the rules of that scheme are being reviewed and are being relaxed, and the scheme placed on a long-term footing. The outcomes from the revised criteria for eligibility for the student support scheme are encouraging. I understand that over the previous 5 years, just 79 people applied for student support. However, in 2020 alone, this figure increased to 105 applicants. So again, a huge increase, but more is required. In my own department, in partnership with the Department of Justice, we introduced a change to the immigration permission for spouses and partners of critical skilled employment permits, allowing them full access to the labour market when they arrive in the country. And again, this allows permit holders and their families to quickly become established and assist in integration in Ireland, in our society. The local enterprise offices also within my remit have targeted initiatives such as the Start Your Own Business courses, the Idea Generation workshops, to engage with migrant prospective entrepreneurs in line with local need. And again, they will continue to provide presentations regarding their services and supports at direct provision centres or emergency reception and orientation centres. Can I touch briefly? Am I okay for time, Nagmah? Yeah, okay. I'll keep
Yes,
going.
absolutely.
Okay,
Please
thanks.
do.
So can I touch then on employment rights, because hugely important that our legislation protects all employees who are legally employed in this country. We have a very comprehensive body of employment rights law, ranging from payment of wages, minimum wage, working time, and unfair dismissals legislation. And that applies to all of our workers, including migrant workers. The Workplace Relations Commission, again, one of the agencies within my remit, is statutorily independent in its functions. Among its main functions are enforcement of employment rights and employment permits legislation, industrial relations, and promoting compliance with employment rights and equality legislation. Inspection and enforcement services carry out inspections in workplaces to monitor compliance with employment rights and employment permits law, and they may work jointly with other regulatory agencies across Ireland. The WRC provides a fee-free, impartial and informal adjudication service on a range of workplace-related complaints. They also adjudicate on complaints under the Equal Status Acts regarding discrimination in the provision of goods and services, accommodation and education. It's a really important service for everybody that has a concern or a complaint. For employment permit holders, many of the criteria associated with the employment permit system are aimed at ensuring that migrant employees are treated in line with Irish employment laws and with a number of safeguards inbuilt in the system, including features like a written contract of employment, ensuring that the permit holder receives that original copy of the permit, prohibiting deductions in respect of employment permit application process from employee remuneration, and setting minimum remuneration levels. In addition, the WRC contact details to provide the employment permit holder with information on employment rights in Ireland. It's printed on the employment permit, and their website provides this information in a number of different languages. So finally, I mentioned I couldn't leave without commenting a little bit on COVID-19. It has impacted so negatively on all of our lives, be it in our social lives or in our economic and working lives. I know it has had really strong and particular impact on our migrant communities. We ourselves have put in new operational arrangements to ensure that our employment regime could continue to operate throughout the crisis, as have all of our offices and agencies. Since 30th of March last year, our employment permit system has operated fully remotely and fully online. All of our staff are working at home on the employment system. We've replaced paper-based elements of the system to allow for a fully online process, and all our decisions and outcomes now issue via email rather than by post. We also reached agreement with the Immigration Service Delivery in the Department of Justice on arrangements to introduce on a temporary basis a type of e-employment permit and a similar soft copy process to transition to permanent residence permission, stamp 4 permissions. We have adopted a very flexible approach in dealing with employment permit issues that have arisen for both employers and employees as a result of the pandemic. We prioritised in particular employment applications I mentioned earlier for medical personnel coming into the country, and we've had over 5,000 such permits issued last year to again make sure that the skills come into the country as quickly as possible. Similarly, the Department of Justice have introduced several extensions to immigration permissions over the last period. I understand the most recent in December extended the period out to the 20th of April for those whose permissions were due to expire between 21st January and 20th of April. And again, these extensions have ensured that those requiring immigration permission to work in the state can continue to do so. And again, providing really valuable services to this country right across the board, particularly on frontline health services. The Department of Justice has also developed and launched a new online system for renewal of registrations in the Dublin area as part of their response to COVID-19, which enables applicants safely engage with the registration office. And I understand that since the launch of that system in July 2020, 47,000 applications have been received from people who would otherwise have had to attend in Burkey. And of those 47,000, 43,000 have been completed. So in conclusion, colleagues, I hope I've given you a good overview of the many facets that are involved in making labour integration work. I think this past year has shown us that the evolution of Ireland's workforce to one that is innovative, adaptive and agile in a very fluctuating and challenged global environment is really increasingly important. We do recognise strongly that diversity, including particularly the contribution by international talent in the workplace, enhances creativity and innovation, which ultimately contributes to a more inclusive and a vibrant, better functioning society. As I mentioned at the beginning, making labour integration work, it is an imperative for Ireland, given the benefits accruing for the individual, the economy and our overall society. I'd like to thank you all for your attention. I'd like to wish you every success with the rest of your conference. It is hugely important. Again, very much welcome the feedback from you. I will certainly be making my own speech available across the civil service because, again, it reflects many of the areas that, as I say, we are all working at in different areas on. But I just, as I say, to close, to wish you, Nagmah, and all of the audience and colleagues, every success with the rest of your conference, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Quinn, for your contribution, and I'm sure the panel members and our audience would join me to thank you. And you started by saying successful integration is the responsibility of all of us, and I think each one of us have to take responsibility for educating ourselves to know what's available and what is the policy and to access it. So, you know, the government can implement and provide, but also we are all responsible to know what we are entitled to. And of course, education is the key. skills to making sure that people of different backgrounds actually have a meaningful job and a meaningful experience of work satisfaction. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Unfortunately, Dr. Quinn cannot stay with us for the panel discussion, and we would like to thank her and maybe say goodbye to her, and then we'll move to the panel discussion.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second part of our afternoon session is a panel discussion on the theme of making labour integration work. And we have 4 fantastic panel members who would be joining me in discussing a number of issues. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to just introduce the panel members, and then I'm going to ask each of them to maybe give a 4 or 5 minute reflection on the theme of today. And just in the interest of time, I will keep an eye on the 4 or 5 minutes. Apologies, just to make sure that we have time to go through questions and answers, and also address some of the questions that the audience have put forward. So our panelist, Dr. Michal Polakowski, is with the Economic and Social Research Institute. He works within the Irish National Contact Point of the European Migration Network, which is based in Ezra. The overall objective of this network is to improve the availability of and access to information concerning migration and asylum at European and member state level in order to support policy and decision-making in the EU. Michal holds a PhD from Maastricht University. Our other panel member, Maviz Ramazani, who is an employer engagement officer at the Irish Refugee Council. She is a global citizenship educator, domestic violence survivor, and a single mother. In her capacity as a facilitator in Amnesty International, Ireland's Human Rights Education Programme, she facilitates student groups in secondary school. Maviz guides teachers on how they can engage their students in relevant community-based campaigns. She also has a charity called Cooking for Freedom for asylum seekers and refugees living without cooking facilities. Maviz is an activist who shares her knowledge and experience of the international protection and direct provision systems in Ireland with a variety of campaigns that currently exist in Ireland, such as Movement of Asylum Seekers in Ireland, the Right to Work campaign, and Refugee and Migrant Solidarity Ireland. Maviz also works with young artists within the refugee community to empower them and to connect them with Irish artists. She's also successfully led to, her work with Trinity College has also led to Trinity offering for asylum seekers access to scholarships in the academic year 2019 to 2020. Our next panel member is Sandra Roos, who's an expert on migrant women labour integration. Sandra is a qualified professional activist in the area of gender, social justice and leadership, specialising in migrant women and employment. She's a political activist, lover of sign language. Over her professional career, she has gained relevant experience working with people from diverse backgrounds, nationalities, life experiences and ages. This includes providing the necessary support to assist them in achieving their personal, educational and professional goals. As a result, she's developed a genuine passion for working and advocating for the rights of people through mobilizing these communities. Sandra also has been nominated as one of the 125 people to follow on LinkedIn in the area of diversity, equity and inclusion. And last but not least, there are Dr. Ebun Joseph, who's a labour integration and anti-racism expert. Dr. Joseph is a race relations consultant Director of the Institute of Anti-Racism and Black Studies, and Chairperson of African Scholars Association in Ireland. Dr. Joseph is a coordinator and lecturer in UCD of the first Black Studies module in Ireland. She's an author, TV panelist, columnist, equality activist, and a convener of various webinars on anti-racism. With a focus on labour markets and race relations, she has presented at several conferences, business and non-profit organisations. She's also published and racial stratification in Ireland, a critical race theory of the labour market inequality, and also the co-author, she's also the co-author of the book, Challenging Perceptions of Africa in Schools. So, you can agree with me, we have a fantastic panel with many different experiences ranging from different backgrounds. So I'm going to ask maybe one by one. Michal, can I ask you to maybe a 4 or 5 minute reflection on this theme?
Of course.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. And let me start my reflection with making an introductory remark. People migrate for various reasons. Some travel for international protections, others to study, while some others exactly for the purpose of work. And this is why we could talk about a variety of migrant labor market experiences depending on migration pathway. Also, there are at least 2 perspectives from which labor integration can be analyzed. So first, it will be domestic and then international. The benefit of comparative analysis is that it allows us to understand how our country is faring vis-a-vis other countries. While we lose some detail, and this is unavoidable, we gain some broader context. On the other hand, the country-oriented perspective zooms in on phenomena that are invisible from international perspective. Here we get more insight into functioning of policies, but also a more fine-grained picture of situation in the labor market. And from the perspective of integration monitoring, labor market monitoring, there are at least 3 basic indicators of labor market integration, and this is employment rate, unemployment rate, and activity rate. In this intervention, I will be focusing only on unemployment and employment. And in my very short speech, I would like to refer to work by the European Migration Network, the Irish contact point of which sits within the ESRI, and research under the ESRI Research Programme for Integration and Equality, funded by the Department of Children, so this CEDIY, and previously it was funded by the Department of Justice and Equality. And from a comparative, broader, more international perspective, which looks at aggregate categories, so does not distinguish between specific nationalities or countries of origin, the situation of migrants as compared to Irish population is not bad. The employment rate of EEI individuals is higher than that of Irish, and we heard this in the keynote, whereas the employment rate gap for non-EU individuals belongs to smallest in the EU. So Ireland is among top 5 nations in the EU when it comes to employment rate gap. And the analysis of the EU-wide data shows that a slightly higher rate of employment among EU citizens than member state nationals is a common pattern. So in general, EU citizens have higher employment rates. And the employment rate gaps for non-EU workers, so non-EEA workers, vary a lot in terms. So the gap is biggest in Sweden, where it exists, where it exceeds 30 points, and in Finland, the Netherlands, and Belgium, when this gap in employment rate hovers around 25%. The employment gap in Ireland is around 3%. And the EU average for this type of gap is 12 points, which means that non-EU individuals have lower employment levels on average. So in many respects, the unemployment rates for the 2 categories of migrants mirror differences in employment rates. So for categories of migrants with higher employment levels, their unemployment rates will be low. Similarly, for those with low employment levels, one might expect high unemployment. Now, if we turn to a state perspective, we see a more nuanced picture between various nationalities and ethnic groups. And the recent publication by my colleagues from ESRI such as the monitoring report on integration 2020, demonstrate that when looking at unemployment rates, EU-born individuals have lower unemployment rates compared to Irish nationals. The report Origin and Integration, a study of migrants in the 2016 Irish census, also published in 2020, presents lower employment attainment as compared to those born outside of the EU. Yet, what the ESRI researchers identified is the split between West EU, so western part of the European Union, and East EU, so the countries which joined the EU after 2004 in this respect. Also, unemployment is more pronounced among individuals originating from countries with high rates of protection applications, international protection applications. Compared to white migrants, Black migrants are more likely to be unemployed. However, this is not the case for Asian migrants. Further, in case of non-EU nationals, having Irish citizenship is associated with the lower unemployment and higher work attainment. And finally, the knowledge of English is associated with lower unemployment and especially being in jobs requiring higher skills. So in general, non-Irish nationals, Black non-Irish nationals, and individuals of African origin face higher rates of work-related discrimination than Irish nationals. And the report that I already mentioned, Origin and Integration from 2020, points out an important finding within region characteristic of migrants, like individuals originating from Asia or Africa, for example, show a striking diversity. In this sense, one should not generalize about labor market performance basing on the region of origin. And I think I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sandra, can I ask you to go?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you to the Immigrant Council of Ireland for organizing this successful week. I think it's extremely important to have this type of platform where we can amplify the voices of migrant people, but also to show the diversity within the migrant communities living in Ireland. I look forward to this conversation today together with my colleagues, because it is a safer space where we can connect the policies and the real struggle of and needs of migrants. And when I talk about migrant, I'm referring to migrant and migrant descendants, but also to the whole diversity within the migrant community and the intersectionality with other elements and components that do affect their life as well. I remember Dr. Manula last Monday during the panel, he said something that social inequalities are connected. And this is something that we need to take in consideration when we are talking about labor integration, because all these different elements play an important role and enable migrant people to access to not only to gain employment, but also to access to good quality of working condition, retention. That I think the sergeant yesterday from the integration unit was talking about this, stability, progression in their career at any levels as well, and in any sector of the Irish labor market. Because as a whole, like as I mentioned, the migrant communities are very diverse. We are coming from different backgrounds and we have different career goals. And this has to be taken in consideration when we create these policies about labor integration. I also would like to talk a bit more about the idea of the need to redirect the focus in the migration strategy, because at the moment, even though we know that it's a win-win for everyone, so it's not only a win for the migrant society, but it's also for the whole entire Irish society. It's beneficial for everyone. The main focus is still point at migrants, but the other side of the coin, they need some support as well. They need some support to upskill, to get more knowledge, and to be more in tune of the reality of migrant people living in Ireland. So then, when it comes to the real life, they can apply all this knowledge and tools in for example, during the recruitment process. So we need to make sure that there is a balance between the migrant people and the general population. So that's all what I would like to see today to talk about that, and also to talk about long-term integration, because they are migrants and then they're living here in Ireland for many years now, and they are still struggle when it comes to getting employment, the quality of employment. And the reality is that And actually, I was last week in a meeting with other migrant women, and one of them said something like, you know, for me to get a job is the way to integrate in the society. So there are so many migrants, and they struggle every day, and their mental health has been impacted. And you know, they try to keep going, and they try to work hard to be part of the society. But there is the other side, that they need more support to make sure that we work together to have a real integration. So that's all, but I look forward to listen to my colleagues, and thank you again for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Boone, can I ask you to go next, please?
Thank you so much. Just to say I'm on. Yeah. Just to say thank you so much for the invitation, and you know, the week that, you know, you've all had in, you know, this whole week looking at migrants' integration in the labor market. I guess I want to go from the perspective of the lived experience of people, which is an area which I try to focus on more. I think the key question when we look at making labor integration work, the question I want us to think, everybody on the call, what I want us to think is, what is it? What story? What makes us comfortable when we walk into a place of work, and we walk into a boardroom, or we walk into a meeting, and everybody in the room is white? What is it that makes us comfortable? What story do we tell ourselves? How do we make that a story that we're comfortable with? When we walk into the room, when we walk into our offices, and everybody is maybe white Irish or maybe from Western Europe. See, we talk about integration. The role labor market participation plays in the integration of migrants cannot be overemphasized. It is almost impossible to be fully integrated and feel like a valued member of society if you do not have access to paid employment. But what is most important as well is how we frame the process, how we talk about it, how we measure it. What do we measure? You know, most times we talk about 15%, we talk about 20%, we talk about migrants. But again, a lot of the work I have begun to do shows that when you conflate migrants together into a group, the most marginalized people always still fall to the cracks. You know, the SDG goals talks about, you know, making sure that no one is left behind. But what we find is when you conflate migrants together, when you conflate experiences, when you conflate data, when you conflate, you know, without providing disaggregated data, whether it's on COVID, the impact on COVID, whether it is the impact on those who are being promoted, labor market, the pipeline, looking at those who are able to navigate the labor market, when we are not breaking it down, you know, to Eastern Europeans, Western Europeans, nationality of descent, skin color, when we don't break it down, then we walk away feeling that, oh yeah, you know, it's only 15%, it's only 20%. If I throw some quick stats at us from our 2016 census statistics, when we look at it, that as at that time, the unemployment rate of migrants was 15.4%. It was like, okay, well, not so bad. But then when you begin to look at it based on nationality of descent, you begin to see that if you were Western European in Ireland, your unemployment rate was between 5% and 9%. If you were Eastern European, your unemployment rate was between 13% and 19%. If you were African descent in Ireland, your unemployment rate was between 42.5% and 63%. Now, when we look at that, if in Ireland, if the unemployment rate in Ireland was 43%, we will have a national crisis. We would say there was a national crisis. And so when the African community, the African Irish community in Ireland have an unemployment rate of 43 to 63%, and don't get me wrong, because when we begin to talk about labor market integration, we look at people who don't have right to live in Ireland, we look at people who cannot speak English. I'm not talking about people who don't have right to live in Ireland. I'm not talking about people who can't speak English. I'm not even talking about people who do not have education. Our census statistics shows us that For example, when I broke down 3 different nationalities, it shows us that people from Nigerian descent in Ireland, 83% of them said they could speak English well. So language, because those are the areas we normally go to when we begin to talk about unemployment and when we begin to talk about the labor market integration. So we look at all of that. So level of English is not the problem. Education level is not the problem. And until we begin to look at the real key issue, why Ireland ranks really badly, because, you know, we can massage data and provide data that makes it look like if we're doing very well. But when we look at the mental health issues faced by people of migrant descent, you know, mental health issues doesn't just pop out from nowhere. It pops up from the experiences that people have. One of the things I did in my work when I began to research was to look at how do I talk about data, how do I talk about the experiences. I was able to provide a framework to look at the migration to labor participation process. And I looked at it in 4 key stages. The first stage is expectation. So when people come into our labor market in Ireland or anywhere in the world, they come with an expectation, whether they are economic migrants or whether they are people who are fleeing wars or terrors, or whether they are people who have just come to be with their loved ones. They all have an expectation, and that expectation is to do well. But then the next thing that happens from expectation is that people then have an experience. So whatever the experiences that people have in the labor market, it is really vital, because that is the second stage. The second stage is experience. From the experience, they begin to then negotiate how to respond to the experiences that they have. And in negotiations, the experiences reconstructs people's identities. Why that is important is because the experiences that people have in the labor market, it doesn't just leave them the same. It reconstructs their identities. People change. People come in with energy, motivated, wanting to work, wanting to give. And the experiences, not because they are not able, not because they can't speak English, not because they don't. I can tell you stories and stories of people. I know a person, she has a PhD. She has a PhD, right? And she is working as a level 5 care assistant. That is 5 academic levels lower than her academic level. That is a major problem. That has its mental health issues will definitely be there. Inability to work with family, all of those things impact on people. So when we look at policies, when we talk about policies and we talk about institutions, we make it look like if institutions are things. No, people make policies. People are in the institutions. People form institutions. So it is when we begin to look at all of these policies, the question I want us to be thinking about as we are on this call is, what are the stories we tell ourselves when we put policies in place? How do we look at those policies to say, how inclusive is this policy? Because we are recruiting. Right now, you find even when people of migrant descent are able to navigate, most of them are at the bottom of the ladder. We're still at the bottom of the ladder. So when we look at those, so everything, policies from the pipeline, how do we look at the pipeline? When people have come in 5 years, people you came in with have navigated and you are still there. So policies, for me, some of the policies that I think that are not in place, that we don't look at, things like social capital. In Ireland, we still allow, well, not just in Ireland, in the Western world, we still allow people to, use social capital to navigate the labor market. And you say, how does that happen? Well, when we say that, recommend someone. So when you recommend someone, it is a legal way of people getting into the labor market. But if a group of people are not even in the labor market in the first place, if they are not in those positions, so it means that when they recommend people, the people they recommend will be from their own networks. And what happens is we will continue to perpetuate that inequality. It becomes a cycle of inequality that is almost impossible to break. So we look at things like that. We recruit from our networks. There are no laws, no policies that insist that we recruit from outside of our network. There are no policies that insist that employers should make sure we are 15% in Ireland, migrants in Ireland, the workforce is about 15%. There is no policy that insists that recruiters, HR managers, line managers should make sure that you must get at least 15% of the pool that you are selecting from must be 15%. Where there are no targets, when there are no laws, where there's nothing, then there's nothing to monitor. There's nothing to make people do things. Even when people experience racism, discrimination, and they want to report it, I mean, like we know, we talk about whistleblower protection. There is no protection. There is no law that protects people who want to report that they experience racism. The onus is on you, the victim, to defend, that they've been racist against you. So we need to look at good examples of countries where the person who has been accused, the organization, the responsibility should be on you to prove that you have not been racist against the person. We have no protection for people who report. I mean, I can give you cases and cases and cases, but I just want us to think about it. What is it? How do we justify the high level of inequality, the high level of underemployment, the high level of unemployment that certain groups in our society are experiencing? And please don't tell me it is because of their level of spoken English. Please do not tell me it's because of their education. And please do not tell me it is because they are not motivated, because I can give you data and data and data, my personal research, EU research, everywhere where Ireland ranks very high. Let's not massage those figures. If we really, really want to do something, we need to go there. We need to go there. We need to name it. We cannot stand in a place of denial. We need to name what is happening to be able to make those changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evan, for that very passionate presentation. And there's loads of points that we can discuss. Can I ask Mavis then maybe your reflection on this theme?
Thank you so much. My name is Mavis Ramazani. I just want to read one quote that will motivate me to speak this afternoon. One woman can make a difference, but together we can rock the world. I am the Employment Engagement Officer for the Irish Refugee Council. The women that I advocate for are women who are in the international protection process, who live in direct provision, who are holders of the labor market access permission. That is a work permit for women and men in the international protection process, and also women who hold refugee status. When it comes to today's theme, making labor integration work, truly speaking, for women like me and the women I represent and I advocate for, integration is not even near. The discrimination that they face are various. No one can fathom the amount of work that I put in advocating. It is even difficult for me personally because, when I communicate with employers, just looking at my name, who is Mavis Ramazani? They don't know me. In Ireland, there is a culture that for you to be able to get somewhere in the labor market, you need to be known by somebody, referred, be part of a network. So the women that I represent in particular, living in direct provision, they're not part of any network. They don't know anybody, nobody knows them. So that is very unfair to place them in that position. Their voices is not heard, they are not seen. So I will say, I will agree, with what Dr. Ebon just said. How do we justify the level of inequality? Because in 2018, the Irish government opted to give international protection applicant the right to work, but there was no effort on their side to educate employers about the individual situation. We are different from the rest of the migrant cohort because once you seek international protection, you do not even have documents. Your documents are with the Department of Justice. You are given a temporary residence permit. Behind it, it says that is not an identity. The Irish government gave the right, but it equally taken it away. There are so many countless barriers into getting into labor market. And as well with the women that I work with, they are highly educated. They speak English quite well. They can present themselves, but the barriers before them, including the lack of recognizing their qualification, is making it difficult for advocates like myself to advocate their case. So we have not begun to integrate individuals in direct provision with labor market access. And those who hold the refugee status into the labor market, they are not recognized. Most have chosen to go for the level 5 healthcare. We have a lot of the women that we represent. They said to me, we cannot fight the barriers. They're just too much for us. So they opt to just do the work, and behind they're in healthcare, in cleaning. Just if you look at my background there, every job is important, but if you choose it, if you are given an opportunity, if those barriers are removed and you're given an option. I had no option when I received in 2018 labor market access. I started looking for any job that was available so that I can earn an income. And another thing is I can be out there building my network, contributing into society. I'm grateful for that opportunity that was given to me by Leila in my background at the Green Door, working with her. But that, to me, is to show you the challenges that are still current, that are very much in our society right now. So we need to work together to represent and look at the barriers, why the barriers are there. Why do you give the right to work and not be able to put in place system to appreciate that there is this talent pool that is out there that is here to contribute and have a right to contribute into the labor market? So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mavis. So thank you to all the panel members for a very interesting start to our discussions. I think we all agree that every human being needs to feel they're making a contribution to society. And I think everyone mentioned that without employment, you cannot be integrated into society. And that is a reality. So there are so many topics and themes running through my head. I don't know where to start from, but can we start with a point that came up when we did this conference, November 2019, that a lot of employers are actually not aware of the regulations, the process, of what is involved of hiring non-EAA citizens, and sometimes they just shy away from it because they think it's too much work. Is this, can we start maybe by discussing that? Has anyone any thoughts, reflections on that? Is this the case? Do you think that employers would rather not have to fill forms and chase paperwork with Department of Justice and just they go for the easy, less path of resistance?
I don't think that is
something
the case.
We could do then.
If I just jump in there, I don't think that is the case. Okay. And the reason I say that is because pre-2004, before we had the ascension states, if you go and look at our census statistics there, you will see that, people from outside of the EU, people from African descent, if you look at it, there were higher numbers. The numbers that were being given, stamp 4 to live and work in Ireland was actually higher. It was increasing. But post 2004, when Ireland got the more acceptable workers that we had. So it's what I call the disposable workers. So we dump and use, when we are just essential to work, not that you are essential workers. So we take what we want. So we use them. So pre-2004, we were able to know the difference. We were able to do that. But when we got, people coming through the ascension states, we dumped all that, so we do that. Even when when employers need to recruit import I call it imported staff from outside of Ireland. We are able to do that. We are able to offer all the things. We are able to investigate. So why can we not do that here? I think for me, it is more of a managerial carelessness, where we don't care. It's like, I will just do the easy thing. It's not because we can't do it. It's not because we don't know how to do it. I mean, this is the day of internet. It's one click. You just type it in. It's one click and you get the answer. So it's like there's no consequence. Absolutely no consequence. So we can do it. We can get away with it. Who is going to fight? You have no voice. There's none of you in the places of power to argue, or, you can't even, when you go to court, your case is thrown out. So I think it's more of a carelessness than the fact that, they are not able to.
But Mavis mentioned that a lot of employers are not aware that people in direct provision or, who are seeking asylum, they actually have a right to work. A lot of employers are not aware of it. Am I correct in saying that, Mavis? Employers are not aware of it, and then they look for paperwork that is held in Department of Justice.
No, right now they are aware, but I feel, and I have seen in my communication, they are not ready to come on board and offer opportunities. There is not a lot of paperwork that goes into employing our clients, with labor market access permission. It's only one form once you're employed. It's just that there needs to be that willingness. Like I said, that in Ireland, there is that culture that if you are not part of the network, if you don't know someone, it's going to be an uphill for you to get into employment. So they now, since 2018, we have been advocating. And I also myself been in platform where I talk about this 2018, right to work that people have. And it has been published on social media, but that willingness to give someone like me with my name, an opportunity, it's not there yet. So there needs to be more advocate to say that we have women who hold labor market access permission with this qualification and need these opportunities. There seems like employers are willing to give the women internship opportunities and entry level, the lowest of levels. They are open to that, which is good, but there are women who are qualified for better position. Why not open those opportunities as well? Why so much discrimination? There is exclusion and discrimination of the group that I represent and I advocate for, and I will continue to represent and advocate for. But on my own, I cannot make any difference. I don't have that level of influence or the network, but I believe that the more I talk about it. So when it comes to awareness, yes, they are aware.
Okay. Michal, with your work in Ezra, do you have any reflections on employers and what their attitude towards hiring non-EEAA?
Thank you for this question. Rather general comment that what we know from our EMN work is that, and we know it from stakeholders that we've consulted, is that there has been some confusion regarding employing, especially spouses, or so there is a confusion regarding employment of certain categories of individuals, and so this phenomenon has been noted by our stakeholders.
Okay, Sandra, do you have any reflections on?
Yeah, I actually have a slight different view, and from my colleagues, that's okay, but I think it's back to my point that I made before about the lack of understanding of the complexity of the migrant spectrum. So in general, people that are outside of this bubble, that if you are, the one than ourselves, then we are working or we are migrants, and we are very aware of the different laws, and we are very familiar with everything that is related to migration. But those who are outside of this, they don't have that knowledge, and it doesn't mean that they are not responsible as well to make the effort to learn about that. But it just like as I giving you a practical example. For example, recruiters, when they are in that process and they get, I don't know, 1,000 of CVs, and let's say that they overcome the barrier of the surname, and they overcome the barrier of nationalities, and they are ready to hire anyone But when it comes, for example, to the stamp, like you have literally 3-5 seconds to decide if the person is suitable or a right candidate or not to pass to the next stage. And they have only 3 or 5 seconds. If they don't have a stamp 4 of they are European, so they do know very clear that they have the right to work, automatically they will kind of reject their CV. And I'm not saying that this is right, but what I say that we need a better, so everyone, the general population needs a better understanding of the migration elements. So for example, in the case of the stamp, we have, I think, between, I don't know if there are 11 or 10 different types of stamps, and 9 or 8 of them, they do allow people to work in Ireland. But people don't know that. They usually, the knowledge is only limited to one type of a stamp. So stuff like that is something that we need to work out, and the strategies need to make sure that the two sides of the coins are involved in the integration of migrant people. And also, and yeah, so that's my point. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, through my own work, I work for Enterprise Ireland, their semi-state agency. I deal with a lot of technology companies, and one of the clients I was talking to recently, they sort CVs. So what he said to me, that a lot of multinational companies, they have become very aware of the bias they have about a person's name, their address, you know, their nationality. So what they're doing is they're actually asking that all CVs, all the areas that you could you could be biased towards or against, that all that information is stripped, so that when you're presenting a CV to a potential recruiter, you just have the facts about a person and nothing that you can interpret, you know, he's from here and she's from there. So I think it is an awareness that is actually increasing among employers, and they do realize that they have, there is a bias, and you know, it has to start somewhere, maybe with the larger multinational companies, but I knew it anecdotally from a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was fantastic that people are actually asking for CVs with that kind of information taken out of it. Yes, Sandra.
No, just to add, and I think that you are making a very good point, but just to remember or to remind people that migrant people, again, are coming from different backgrounds and they have different career goals. So not everyone wants to work in the multinational sector. And usually that type of resources are very connected to the multinational, sector again, sorry. So we need to make sure that the same type of resources are in all the sector of the Irish labor market, because people want to work in art, they want to work in the public sector, they want to work in academia, they want to work in the NGO sector, and we need to make sure that there are equal opportunities and equity at the Irish labor market.
Okay, so
can I just add a little bit of caution there? Sorry, just a bit of caution, which I always find when we start talking about unemployment of people, or whether the unemployment or underemployment, it always ends up becoming a conversation about people not having the right to work. My whole research was not about people who didn't have the right to work, because I wanted to avoid that cop-out, and I call it a cop-out. We know, it's a cop-out we have. Look, how many recruiters are actually getting CVs from people who don't have the right to work? I'm talking about people who have Irish citizenship. They're Irish, they're African Irish, or they're Spanish, they're Irish people, or they're EU. That's what I'm talking. I'm not even talking about, because we always, we do that cop out, and we then go and say, oh, because they don't know. Leave that one first, because that's why when the department gave us that, when the department said they were going to grant people who were seeking asylum the right to work, I was like, this is good. But you see, the problem is that there is a bigger problem, that those who even have the right to work cannot find work. So you are just going to come and join the pool who are not going to be able to find work. And that's exactly what we're saying. There is a bigger problem. And I think we need to have that conversation and not cop out and run in to say, oh, they don't have the right to work. That's not where the problem is. We have a taste-based discrimination which is prevalent in our system, which needs to be addressed. Policies need to be put in place to address them.
So Edwin, you said that around 40% of Africans are unemployed, and Mikhail, in your presentation, you said the percentage among Asians is much lower. So why is that then? Is there less prejudice, or do they have a type of skill that is required so they can't be choosy about taking them on board?
I think, thank you for this question. I think we cannot explain this issue with just one answer. I think there is a number of suggestions as whether why it is like this. So this difference between Africans and Asians. So first of all, it's very important to know that, as I said before, that there is a huge intra-group diversity. So there are groups, so there are nations or nationalities in African and Asian groups, wider groups, which are more successful when it comes to employment, and there are less successful. And this is one very important thing. So we cannot generalize from this. The second issue is perhaps, which is related to the issue Sandra just mentioned. So there are different motivations, but there are also different pathways to Ireland. Some people come from direct provision, whereas some other people come through a legal migration path. And this can have some consequences. That direct provision, as we heard, for several years didn't allow people, or the system didn't allow several people to engage in the labor market. And of course, one may expect some scarring effects. I'm not 100% sure here, so I guess we need some more research on this, but just this is a sound speculation, I would say. So, there are people who have this, experience of immediately moving in Ireland just for the purpose of work, and of course they will have high employment results, whereas other people are coming from for different reasons. And I think we have to be very aware of this. People are coming to study, people are coming to seek for international protection. So this very crude differentiation can explain why some outcomes are there, but obviously there is the issue of discrimination, and that's you cannot doubt it. And our colleagues from the ESRI run several or some research on this issue, like sending CVs with African and Asian and Irish surnames, and of course, they could see that the discrimination is there. Also, there is a recent research on housing market, which suggests a similar discrimination patterns. So I think there is a number of factors which are contributing to this different situation, in the labor market. Thank you.
And I think, the theme is coming from all the panel members is that you cannot just say migrant community. There are so many facets, and people are different backgrounds, different capabilities, and different reasons they're here. And it's a bit unfair just to group everybody together. So, I mean, if you're talking about really addressing racism and discrimination, do any of you have any thoughts on the area of diversity and inclusion training in the workplace? Does that work? Do you have any reflections or opinions on that?
Well, I think for me, my opinion is diversity and including training alone does not work. We need the whole society to come on board, accept where there are discrimination and racism against other individuals, nationalities, and together, yes, you can go to as many trainings, but if you yourself as an organization are not going to change your approach and the unconscious and conscious biases you have towards a particular situation, then the training is alone. It's truly not going to work. We need to put into practice and make those changes.
I think that if I can just add, someone had put a question there. Well, actually, not a question, a comment. Owen Down. I don't think I can pronounce that name very well, but Owen Dane. And again, he mentioned two things. One of them is about debiasing job description. So that is really when I run anti-racism trainings, it's not just about people. So I find two different kinds of companies I go to. One set I go to, they just want you to tell them 10 things to do. Tell me 10 things to do. You know, so like, do this, do this, do this. I'm like, that is performative. You know, when push comes to shove, when you're in a tight corner, when I'm not watching, when nobody's watching, you will go back to the bias within you because you have not unlearned that bias. You have not identified where did the bias come? How did I learn it? What does it mean? And then how can I challenge the bias? How can I police myself? So the reason unconscious bias, I don't call it unconscious, I call it implicit bias. The reason the bias training doesn't work is because we only tell you is the 12 steps of how to be an anti-racist. That don't work. You need to first, we need to first do the theoretical. You need to understand where is it coming from. How do, so to find it in myself, to be able to own it, you know, that this is how I see, this is how it operates. Then you then learn the 10 steps. You then have to actually do that active unlearning. It can't happen without it. That's why it falls down. So yeah, so some of the examples, you know, Owen gave, you know, like, you know, blind CV approach, it does work. You know, again, I can give you a lot of times it was done when you actually take out, strip everything that can help them recognize you. It does work. Unfortunately, even if, say, for example, myself, even if I change my name, right? Because my first university was University of Benin, Nigeria, right? If I leave my university there, you know, maybe because I've been here a long time now, but if I leave it there, then you can say, oh, Nigeria, she must be, even if my name is Jackie Robinson or whatever it is, you know, so you can, so it's the same thing with age. If I say, you know, because I used to work in an organization, we know how to look at a CV and guess where you're from. I can calculate your age without you telling me your age. I look at when you finish secondary school and then I say, give or take, the oldest you were when you left secondary school, 20 years, most likely between 16 and 20. So I just calculate your age plus or minus 4 and I will be spot on, you know? So we know, people know what to do. They look at where you did your work experience. They can find it in there if they are looking for it, you know? So key things, I think that bias anti-racism training works, but it would only work if it is done properly, if it is done with both a theoretical and a practical one. And then I think, Mavis, I really like what you said about the fact that it has to be the whole society. And that's why, you know, most times I've been shouting about, you know, like education. We need to appeal to education. Education needs to help us, you know, because that's the only way. Education is the way we can reach everybody. You know, education is not a solution to anti-racism, or ignorance is not the reason for racism, but education can help. And right now we're willing to take anything.
But I suppose education is maybe a bit more intellectual, but at the end of the day, the reason behind racism is because we don't believe that the human race is one. We believe some people are more superior to others, and that is not an intellectual thing. That's something you believe with your heart, and it's kind of part of who you are. So, you know, and I think really reflecting on what's happening with COVID, if it has taught us anything, it has taught us that the whole world is one human family, and you know that unless we vaccinate everybody, no one is safe, and it is a way of bringing everyone together. So kind of, you know, talking about maybe racism or discrimination at an intellectual level, okay, you might understand it, like you might read, I don't know, science, but it's your heart and it's your attitude that, I suppose, Evan, as you were saying, no training would give you that unless you're really open to it. So I don't want to, so maybe we have a few minutes and then we're going to open it to the audience. Can we think about positive things then? What do you think we could do? What are the main things that we could do to actually help the situation? Maybe kind of think positive rather than, because we've discussed what are the issues and we know the facts, the figures, and there is people behind all these numbers and the government policy was outlined. But at the end of the day, each of us, what do we think we can do as society, in groups, in communities?
Well, if that's okay, I don't mind to jump in. I actually would like to make a point about Evan, which is say education, and I agree with her. It's extremely important, and education can come in different forms. So it doesn't have to be at a high level. It can come from the house, from the parent teaching to our kids what it means to be equal And I think that's something that everyone can take on board from today and start doing their work, because it's our own responsibility to make sure that we raise our kids in an equal society. So what I will say is that, as I said before, we need more information, and we need to make sure that we bring a human approach to this topic, and we stop kind of labeling people and putting people in boxes, because that's what we do at the moment. We are trying to fight data. We are trying to fight to have all these boxes where it's a migrant, is a woman, is a person with disability. But the problem is, like, when we find people that they are actually ticking different boxes, we don't have the capacity to support them and to address their needs. So instead of taking people as if it's a migrant, or she's a woman, or we need to start looking at people as an individual and see what they need. So in that sense, like especially this year, I have been working with many migrant women with disabilities, and also they have other elements like religions and etc. How do you support them if you are only kind of narrowing yourself to one specific box? It's impossible. So we need to make sure, again, that we have this human approach where we see people as a human being and part of this society, no matter if they just are a new arrival or they have been here for 20 years. Their needs are different, but still they need support, and we need to listen to them.
Okay. Anyone?
Sorry, just to add there, a positive thing that can be done is give someone a hand up. If you are in position, give somebody a hand up and opportunity, in the employment sector. And let us advocate together. Don't wait for Mavis to send you that email that you may or may not recognize. Approach Mavis and say, Mavis, how can I get involved? How can I get involved? What difference can I make? Each and every one of us, we just need to take that step to say, I am here, I can make it possible for somebody. Get involved, get in touch, let us advocate together. And as I said earlier on, everybody needs a hand up. If you're in position to give somebody a hand up, please do so. Thanks.
I think that, just to plug my book. So for those who haven't read it, plug my book in there. They said I should plug my book every time I'm speaking, but yeah, plug my book. But why I'm doing that now actually is because in here, I write about, while I challenge all of the inequality, I also look at what can be done. So one of the things, and it is not unproblematic on its own, but one of the things I suggested was that, we need to, when you talked about people who are marginalized, the one thing they want is to be accepted. So one of the things I suggested was that, how can we start from nursery school, primary school, secondary school, to begin to teach how we accept difference, not tolerate difference. You only tolerate what you have power over, what is horrible and what you can control. Because at the heart of it, is that we do not accept difference. We think that some difference are more negative than the other. So my theory was, if we begin to teach people how to be accepting of difference, don't judge it negatively or positively. Accept it as a true representation of the person. If we can begin to do that, like Nia, like you said, we cannot get everybody. It's like the bell curve, right? So there is that, 70% in the middle who can sway left or right. So for me, I'm looking for that 70%. There is this 14% on the right. They will forever be right. They will forever be racist or whatever it is, or supremacist. They will forever be that, So I'm not looking for them. Somebody else can be stronger than me and do that. But there is 70% in the middle that they are not sure. They can either go left or right. For me, that's the number we're looking for. If we can, so that means it's like herd immunity. We need racism immunity. If we can get our own racism immunity, where we have, more people who are anti-racist, then we can make racism not cool anymore. The MAGA hat, now we are make racism uncool again. That's what we want to try and do. So that's for me is one thing. Let's start teaching from primary school, secondary school. So it's called managing difference. How do we manage difference? I think that is one key thing, that we can do. But also, as I look at education, I also think policy is important. We need to, every organization, anybody on this call, you're asking, we don't know what to do. I'm like, okay, stop. Just go to your organization, look at the policy, ask yourself, which policy in my organization is making inequality continue? The only reason this inequality is continuing now, it's not because you're doing racism and all those things. No, because there are policies and there are laws in place that are maintaining and reproducing inequality. So if we really want to do the work, let's go back to your policy in your organization and look at it. Look at that policy. In there, you will find why that inequality is being produced. So we need to make structural changes, and those structural changes are tied to policy.
Okay, so what about quotas? Michael, do you have any reflection if there were quotas for different people?
You mean the employment quotas?
Yeah.
I would switch this question to, because maybe I would prefer to talk about the previous topic, which is, is this good practices. And what came to my mind is when I look at the last local elections in Ireland, that you have some representations of people with a migrant background, but also they are underrepresented, both when it comes to the share of people who are running for the ticket, but also who voted. And I think this is really important thing on the very, at the very heart of the democratic society, that basically you can vote, and if you can vote, just vote, and you have a freedom to choose. So I think this could be my positive message. So basically, if possibly be more engaged, but also if possibly be more engaged in your workplace, like join trade union or this type of organization which is representing your interests. Or if you're a self-employee or a small employer, join employers organization. Just enter structures which can somehow amplify your voice.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments on quotas? And then we're going to go and ask a Q&A.
I believe in quotas. I think, okay, and I'll explain why. Again, read my book, because my book is about racial stratification, and I explain it by racial stratification. That our society, the way it is structured in such a way that some people start at the top and some people start at the bottom. So the outcome, the result we see, the statistics we see, we say 50% unemployed or 20% more likely to be unemployed. So we look at where people end up. So my work says that actually it's not about where people end up, it's about where people start. If you're starting so far back down, where you end up is inevitable. That's how stratification works. Unless you work 1, 2, 3, 4 times as hard to be able to compete with those who are at the top of the ladder. So if somebody is starting here and I'm starting here, if everybody we treat everybody the same, then everybody moves. So everybody who is at the bottom will still be at the bottom. So whether it's the traveler, Roma, black person who is at the bottom, they will still be at the bottom. Even among white people, whether it is the white women at the bottom and white men at the bottom, they will still be at the bottom, unless because there is something that has advantaged this group that has made them be on top. For some of people, is their whiteness. For some people, is the fact that they don't need to apply for visas too. So that has pushed them up. So if you then want to be able to allow these people at the bottom to compete, you have to. It cannot happen without quotas. We've done it for women. We've looked at women professors. We've said that 5 women professors are going to be given now. Why? It's not because the women are not able, because the system is structured. It's like the old boys club, we recruit from our networks. So these marginalized people are not in those networks, and do you understand? So the people who are recruiting, they don't have marginalized people in their networks. So to do that, to bring more marginalized people into those networks, we need to do quotas. It is not discriminating. It is actually just trying to level the playing field. You're starting here, people are here. We are trying to bring them here so they can compete equally with others.
And hopefully in the long term, there will be no need for quotas because everybody would be okay. Okay, so maybe we'll go to the audience. I have a great assistant, Teresa. She has volunteered to read the questions. Teresa, are there any questions from the audience you would like to put to the panel?
Yes, thank you very much, Nagmah. Yes, we received a a lot of questions both in the Q&A box and also on Facebook where we're broadcasting live. There were also many comments agreeing with the speakers and also adding additional input to the conversation. So I will invite everyone to open the Q&A box and check the answered question section where you can find all the additional comments. I will be focusing here on reading some of the questions, and we'll see how many we can go through. The first question I want to ask to Michał, it's about the reports that you mentioned in your opening statement. And the question is whether you send those reports to any policymakers and how they were received. And then the second question, I'm not sure if you will be able to answer, but there is also a question, what will be the list of eligible employment permits that will be listed by the Department of Enterprise? Is that something that could be predicted? And if so, how much in advance?
Thank you for the question. I mentioned at least 3 reports in my short speech. So the practice is to publish such reports and to have a launch event. So there was a discussion on this report, and usually it's policymakers who are attending this type of meetings. But I just contributed to one of them, so I don't want to talk on behalf of the authors of these reports. But yes, these reports are published. These reports are on our website, so www.esri.ie. Also, I guess in some of the more recent reports, you can see the YouTube recording of this event, so you can follow the debate we had some time ago. So this is for the reports, and when it comes to employment permits, I don't know. We know that there is this discussion on this, but I cannot tell it for sure what will be the types of employment permits. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought so, that this is not really something that can be predicted, and it's being decided upon every year. We've received plenty of questions and comments around stamp 3 holders, which is a group of people who are arriving in Ireland on dependent spousal visas. This group can legally reside in Ireland, but they are unable to enter employment. And there is a lot of more comments and questions, people describing their personal situations, but their questions are more, why stamp 3 exists in Ireland? What can we do to change it? When can it be changed? And what can be done to support people in accessing employment? Not sure if any one of the speakers could address this issue. Just to mention that we will be taking note of all the questions and key points that were raised, and we will be sending them to the Department of Business and Enterprise and Dr. Orla Quinn, especially those questions around work permits and visas.
Can just mention there, although I'm not a lawyer, so this is not my it's not my expertise, but from what I know is that the vast majority of stamp 3 holders are women. So they are women and they have been following their partner, and this is clearly an issue that is related to women, so gender equality, so it's gender and migration putting together. And even though they are high qualified, I have met over the years, I have met several of them, and they are high qualified with talent and they're ready to work. The system they don't allow them to start a life, because at the end of the day, what they are doing is like they are holding back until they have the opportunity to start to integrate in the society. So unfortunately, I cannot say more about that, but I think it is something that the government need to look at and to make sure that they change and they change the system to allow stamp 3 holder to work in Ireland.
If I may add to that, I had the experience of working with stamp 3 holders on a campaign that they launched 2 years ago to challenge stamp 3 basically. And what was found from that campaign was that majority of stamp 3 holders have had level education. And this is a short comment to what Dr. Quinn, Dr. Orla Quinn said, that Ireland wants to attract very skilled and high educated migrants. Many of them are already living in Ireland. they just need the right to work. They have lots of potential and they want to work, but the system currently is prohibiting them from work. So that's the comment about stamp 3. I think this question is now for Ebun. The second generation Afro-Irish people born and bred in Ireland, are they marginalized as well? And the second question related to that, how do the young Afro-Irish negotiate employment after graduating from Irish universities and third-level institutions?
Okay, thank you. Again, I'll just give a quick example. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I was on a call with a young African-Irish person, you know, and he was telling me about how in his place of work, he found out that, you know, he's earning 4,000 less than his colleague, who they are doing exactly the same job. He's about 26 now, you know, so he just, I think maybe younger than, I'm not sure, but he's one of the young people, you know, he just graduated from university 2 years ago, right? His colleague, they are doing exactly the same work. He found out that he's earning 4,000 euros less than that person. The second thing is they promoted him. They told him they were promoting him and they had given him more responsibility, but his salary for 6 months had not increased. So he was asking me, what can he do? Do you understand? So that is the second generation. Their experience, the only difference with them is that they are actually able to navigate into the bottom of the ladder jobs, you understand? Which our generation couldn't even get into in the first place. So yes, many of them are able to get in, you know, but when you look at the pipeline, they cannot grow. There's no growth, because growth in most of these companies is through sponsorship. You know, somebody sponsors you, somebody mentions your name in the right place. But when you look at the top of the ladder, it's very wide. There's nobody who is mentioning your name, nobody who is recommending you, nobody is even showing you how to do your PDP and to, you know, to advocate for yourself. So that system is still there. So I would say that definitely they are still marginalized. Look at when the George Floyd issue happened last year. It wasn't us who was writing. It was the 13 to 26-year-olds who were actually in the media talking about the racism they were experiencing in their schools. It wasn't me. I didn't go to secondary school here. It was young people who were talking about their experiences in schools. It was young people who were talking about their experiences in the workplace. I'm on speed dial, and I'm not just joking. I'm telling you for real. That's why, you know, when I start talking, I get all hyped up, because I'm like, this is for real. It's not just a joke. I'm okay. But there are so many young people. There are so many people who I know who are not okay. And, you know, in Africa, we talk about Ubuntu. If you're not okay, then I'm not okay. For me, that's it. Because you could be my kid, you could be my brother, you could be my sister. So I cannot say, oh, because I'm okay, I can fend for myself. It's not. You know, I'm on speed dial with many young people who are in the bathroom crying, who are for one reason or the other, either they are being taken to come and you know, management skills or something like that, because they've experienced racism, they've challenged it, and then they are put on the box, they are put on the burner. You know, so all of those things are happening. You know, people who they graduate with their mates 3 years are already, you know, rising up. They are still trying to navigate into the first job. So right now, yes, I'm working with a lot of young people, trying to help them to work smarter rather than work harder. Make sure, you know, after your first year, you're doing internship, you know, make sure you graduate with a first class or a 2-1 so you'll be able to compete. You know, it is hard because they find their mates who graduate with a 2-1 or a 2-2 still able to just walk into a job. They finish with a first class. They are still struggling to even try and find their way in. I'm not saying it's as bad for them, but it is still just as bad. You know, the argument, and the last thing I'll say is that argument that the second generation will be better, go and look at France. Look at France, because France has second and third generation. They are even worse than their parents, their outcome, you know. So that look that, you know, and research has been done on EU level to show that actually second generation are not even any better. You know, if we do not, the change must be deliberate. If we continue to do what we're doing, it will impact on the second generation. If we want to see something different, we must put some specific things in place to make sure they don't have the same outcome.
Yes, Sandra.
No, I completely agree with Evan, and also to add that, and I think I can speak on behalf of all migrants, that we don't want tokenism. We are against that. This is not the solution. We don't just want to put the Black person at the reception or the Spanish person here and there. This is not what we are talking about. There has to be a real restructure. So we have to be an in-depth assess of the whole company, the whole structure, from the bottom to the top, from the right to the left, and to make sure that every single department is inclusive and equity. Well, it offers inclusion and equity for everyone at the workforce. So it's something bigger than actually a training or just to talk about first generation. It has to be something more in deep that needs to be done.
Thank you. The next question is education recognition. Whether there is any research about whether there is perceived differences in qualification received outside of EU.
Teresa, do you mean that that people who have been educated outside of the EU, their qualification might not be seen to be as good?
Yes, exactly. So the question is if there is a research on this topic, and perhaps some of the contributors can comment in general if they know any information about this topic.
Definitely, at least my research shows that. So again, so my doctorate research shows that. I write that in my book as well. And I talk about discrimination against credentials in Black bodies, so that even when that education that comes from outside of the EU is seen as secondary, is seen as inferior, so that the stratification that, the people experience, that not only the people from outside of the EU experience it, their byproducts. So whether it's their language, their education, their skills, even when they have the same experience from outside the EU. For example, a clear one I give is you find somebody who's Irish or British, goes to somewhere in Africa and comes back in. They say the person is what's the word now? That's development specialist, has gone, and then the people who've come from Africa without development skills to come here, they say they are not qualified to do the job. But when a white person goes and learns it to go and work there, they see it as development specialists. Even education. So here, almost everybody I know, all the education they brought from outside the EU, they had to retrain. They had to retrain. And anybody who refused to retrain, they were just struggling unemployed. So most people I know have had to go and do a master's or do a level 5 to do something to buffer up whatever they brought from outside the EU. So there is a discrimination against credentials from outside the EU. So it's not just the people here, it is also the credentials. It is. So that my research shows that, but again, in there, I cite a few other work that has from the OECD, the OECD actually showed that as well. They've done that work, showing that discrimination against those credentials. Because, and the reason they gave in that research, the one I think was a 2014 research, the reason they gave then was that people cannot understand, they cannot, the qualification recognition of those qualifications from outside of the EU. And so that they fill the gap. They fill the gap by filling it with more negative rather than the positive aspect of it. So there it is against, yeah.
And I think, Teresa, there's also evidence that even doctors who are very highly qualified, that the Medical Council here doesn't recognize some of their qualifications. So it's not just, someone with maybe a university degree, even a doctor would face that. Can I just say, before we go to more questions, we were talking about, is it stamp 3 about, and a lot of women who are here with their spouses find that they cannot find work. I know through my own work that the government is actually very encouraging of women to start up their own business, and there's actually a lot of funding available. So I think if you're working with groups of women, and if you do come across women, or if there's anyone in this group today, that you could contact your local enterprise office, Leo. They actually have a lot of support for women to start up their own business. Now they're looking for businesses that can scale, and hire people naturally, but there is actually quite a lot of funding, support, accelerator programs, training programs. There's a lot of hands-on support. So if there is anyone here that has an idea to start a business, and sometimes they say that, you know, during COVID times like this, you could start a business and it could flourish despite what you might think. So there is a lot of support available for women. So I think, you know, if you have an idea, please do pursue it.
That is a great information, and I'm sure many people will be happy to hear it. But my understanding is that stamp tree holders cannot start their own businesses. Don't quote me on that, but I think this is the legal status as well. And there's a question also about differences not only in access to work, but also quality of work that migrants can get in terms of pay, working hours, health and safety. Can panel comment on that?
I think this is the whole idea that I mentioned at the beginning. When we are talking about migrants and labor integration, is not just about gaining employment. That idea of stepping into an employment, and that idea connected to tokenism, where you put the migrant at the front desk, and doesn't mean, you know, with all my respect to people that they are working the front desk, but that's it, and it's not related to their career goals or the level of qualification or, you know, the level of skills. Migrant people are coming from very different backgrounds. And that, I hope, that's something that people get very clear from today. We are very diverse, we have very different skills, and we have very different career goals. So in that sense, it is very difficult to just to put everything in the same box and try to fix and to have a policy or a strategy that is going to be suitable for everyone. So we need to make sure that we do address individual and we address everyone. And actually, sorry, I forgot what was the question at the beginning.
It was about quality of work, yes.
Quality of work.
So, exactly. So, you know, we need to make sure that we provide a quality of a position as well as stability, progression in their career. We need to have more migrant representation at leadership roles. Then they're going to become role models for the future generation as well. So this is very important that we take in consideration all these different aspects, and as well in any area of the labor market, any sector. And although I do appreciate the government effort with to encourage entrepreneurs and people to start their own business, just again to be clear that not everyone wants to start their own business.
Absolutely.
So it is that kind of balance between, yes, if you want to start your own business, here's the support. But if you want to work in a company or in an organization or in a civic, you know, in the public sector, there is also here the resource and the support for you to access to this type of work. So
I think we have time for another. Sorry,
is there anyone else who wants to make any comment?
Yeah, no, I guess I just wanted to add to that, just to say that, yes, and you know, it is really, really important, you know, when we talk about jobs, you know, we think that because people are of migrant descent, or, you know, that you should just be happy to have a job. You know, after the first year, second year, third year, you actually want to be having self-actualization. And being a migrant should not deprive you of having a quality of work. If you've gone, you've paid the price, you've gotten your education or developed your skills, you should be able to navigate the labor market. And those are things that, you know, it just cuts to people's heart. And, you know, and that's why I talk about how experiences reconstruct people's identities. It affects them. You know, all these mental health things we're talking about, where do they come from? You know, when you know this is what I'm gifted to do, this is what I'm skilled to do, this is what I've built myself to do, this is what I've forever dreamt of doing. And it's not something that is out of the ordinary. It's just something that other people walk into, and then the door is just constantly locked against you. It is exhausting, you know. So no, it is beyond just, and a lot of businesses are doing that now. You know, you see a lot of people, but they're only coming in at the bottom, you know, entry level, just entry level. But what about those, you know, 10 years in entry level? You are exhausted. You can't spend 10 years in entry level, you know. So we must make sure that, you know, it is quality of life, quality of work. The right to enjoy your work as well. You know, because I read a comment from somebody there. We're not asking anybody to give anybody anything. Anybody who knows me knows that I work hard, really hard. So we're not asking people to give people things that they have not worked for, but we're just saying that if they have worked, then they should get the things that they have worked for. That's all. You know, they should not just keep working and not being able to navigate the labor market. So those are key things, you know, that needs to be put in place. One of the questions somebody asked, what can be done? Again, we need sponsors. You know, many times people are trying to do mentoring. Mentoring is fine, but if you can do only one, then do sponsor. When you get people of migrant descent come into an organization, assign a sponsor to them. You know what a sponsor is. You guys don't need me to explain it to you. No employer needs me to explain it to them. So they know what it is. So we need to make sure that we need migrants to have sponsors. That is the only way they can rise. That's the only way they can grow. Because I have worked in the system. You know, when the projects come, the person who decides, okay, no, it's Ebon who will do it. No, it's Ifa who will do it. Or no, it's Kiron who will do it. Do you understand? That person who is deciding, if you don't have a sponsor within the organization, if you like work from today till thy kingdom come and do all your skills, you will not get mentioned because you are not going to decide the project. The project, you know, was decided, like, God, I can go on and on, but I'm just gonna look, sponsor. That is one key thing that can make a difference. You know, sponsor the people when they come in there. Make sure we need to collect data. Organizations that really want to do something, you want to collect data. Please collect data in your organization so you can compare. You know, you can see how people growing, who is coming in, who is not coming in, and then set targets. You know, make sure your recruiters. You know, some companies are doing good now. So in my work with businesses, some of them are doing some good work. They're actually insisting that if the recruiter doesn't bring them a diverse pool of CVs, they will not take anything from them. You know, so it's actually forcing them to do that. So as an employer, insist that your recruiter must get a diverse pool. Make sure there is a target. If the target is part of your manager's PDP, he will make it happen. Sure. He will make it happen.
Teresa, we might have time for one more question.
I was just wondering, maybe not, because we also want to have some closing remarks. And before I pass it to you, I just wanted to say that when Ebon was answering the question about the quality of work and access to work that is providing us with self-realization, both all of us, Sandra, Mavis, and myself, we were just nodding our head because this is our lived experience. We all went through that, what Ebon was describing, just trying to find a job that matches our experiences. My journey took me 7 years before I finally got at the starting point when I could finally do whatever I was qualified and passionate about. So with that comment, I will pass to Nagmah for closing remarks and thank you.
So first of all, I would like to thank the panelists, Ebon, Michal, Sandra and Mavis for your contribution to today's discussions. I would also like to thank Teresa, who is the immigration manager with the Immigrant Council of Ireland, for her help with all the IT support and filtering the questions. I think I have lived here over 40 years and I have seen how Ireland has changed. Maybe some of you have been here more recently and you haven't, you don't appreciate the diversity that I have seen over the past 40 years. If you walk down Grafton Street 42 years ago, there was no one except Irish people and there was no other religion except Catholic. But Ireland has changed, so I can see it, but maybe for people who've come more recently, maybe, it's not as obvious, but nevertheless, we do have responsibility to people who are living here to give them a fulfilled life. And as the panelists have mentioned, no one is looking for a favor. Everyone is looking for what they're entitled to and what they're qualified for. So it's not pity, it's actually an opportunity for something that somebody is qualified for. So we have discussed a lot about the role of the employers, the quotas, training and so on. But I think at the end of the day, discrimination is an issue that you can't learn from reading a book. It is an awareness that we all have to have. And as one person mentioned earlier, it's something that has to start from childhood. You have to learn it in school, and you have to grow up with a diverse set of friends, and then you don't see colors and you don't see nationalities. But we probably have some time to go to that, but doesn't mean that we shouldn't really address the issues facing our society today. So it was very, very interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope that the people who have participated, like to thank you for your time, and hope that you enjoyed the discussions. We can't change anything in the course of 2 hours, but it's just really building awareness. And I think maybe I'd like to finish with what Eamon said, that all of us, we can sponsor, we can be a sponsor for somebody, and really one person at a time. If we all at our careers in our companies, we can sponsor someone who has wrongly been marginalized, it might make a big difference. And as more and more enter the workforce, it would be naturally a diverse workforce, which would actually, at the end of the day, all studies seem to show that a diverse workforce contributes to the bottom line, to the profits of an organization. So it's not just for the sake of being kind, but it's actually the sake of having a better company, better outcome, and a better commercial outcome for organizations as well. So it's a win-win for everybody. So thank you very much again to the panelists, to Teresa, and to all the audience for your questions, for your comments, and for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.